In 1986, Dirk Bogarde burnt most of his private papers and scrapbooks in a bonfire at his house in the south of France. He consigned to the flames not just the records of his film career, but also his wartime diaries, his letters, and other evidence of a life which was, in crucial respects, very different to the one he presents in his 7 volumes of autobiography. Until his death in 1999, at the age of 78, Bogarde controlled all information given to the public about himself, and his own family were unable to speak openly about him. He always refused to discuss his private life, and he guarded it fiercely against any intrusion. But some material did survive the flames, including 12 cans of 16mm film, shot by Anthony Forwood, the man whom Bogarde lived with for over 40 years. This remarkable film has never been seen before. For the first time, it is possible to construct a clearer account of Bogarde's life than his own highly edited version.
I'm not a liar. I've never cheated an audience in my life. I hope I've never cheated a reader of any book I've ever written. I've never cheated. You're always found out if you cheat. I had to do those things that you had to go along with. It was all part of the pattern of selling the product, and the product was me.
In an age before television, Dirk Bogarde was known as the idol of the Odeons. He was the archetypal screen lover, with a leading lady always on his arm. But the ever-youthful Bogarde, who made more than 60 films, later claimed that he hated being a star, and that the happiest period in his life had been his childhood.
Our father drove the OM into a very small chalk quarry, where it lived, just at the bottom of the long path up to the garden. And loaded with the baskets and hampers and rugs and the stove, we clambered up under the big elms to the wooden gate, and then through the vegetable garden, smelling warm in the early dusk. Sometimes there were glowworms glinting greenishly in the long grass, and slow snails sliding gently across the path in the light of the torch.
Being me is being allowed to be the person I always was. And the person I always was actually comes back to the fundamentals of my first book, of that child in the meadow doing what he bloody well wanted to do.
And that has
and
been
having that innocence again, having that freedom again, having the possibility of life before you, to exist as simply and as happily as I wish, to go back to retrogress.
In 1926?
Yes.
My sister was behind me, having scrambled painfully through the elder branches, whimpering from time to time. Why do we have to get up at dawn to look for him? Because it's the best time to find them, that's why. To find tortoises, she scoffed, rubbing away at her wretched knees. You'd think you'd been hunting them all your life. And you haven't, she continued, because they come from Africa, and you've never been there.
We go through here. Oh, my goodness me, look at this.
Oh, lovely.
Isn't that
Oh,
lovely?
it's a charming garden.
Dirk's sister, Elizabeth, hadn't seen their childhood cottage since the early 1930s, until this visit with her son, Dirk's nephew, Mark.
Extraordinary, isn't it? But that was all open, so you could see that cottage
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And
through here.
Bogarde was born in 1921 and christened Derek Niven van den Bogarde. His father, Ulrich, came from a well-to-do Belgian family. His sister, Elizabeth, nicknamed Lou, was 2 years younger.
that was my bedroom.
Really?
Yeah. That was Mummy and Daddy's, and that was Nanny's.
How amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dearest Lally, here is your book. I do hope you will like it. Do remember, it is not what we really did. It's just remembering the happy years we had with you at the cottage. Thank you for such a wonderful, happy childhood, which you gave Lou and me. We have never forgotten it. This is the proof. With love, Dirk.
Lally, why do you think he dedicated the book to you?
Well, it was a thank you for all the happy years we had together. Lou, Dirk and myself. And they did have a happy childhood. We all got on so well together. And I think it is that they realised somebody loved them, and that was the great thing.
Lally is now 90 years old. She was just 16 when she was given sole charge of Elizabeth and Dirk.
They were lovely natural children somehow. They were no trouble at all, and we got on famously together. We sort of, I suppose we spoke the same language. I suppose that was the age made an awful lot of difference. I used to get up in the morning, and Dirk and Lou would go down to the farm to get the milk for breakfast. We didn't have any toilets. You went into a sort of shed place, and there was 3 little seats along there, and then underneath there were buckets. It was quite primitive like that, but I mean, that was the country.
Always looks as if it's sunshine all the time, doesn't it? And there's my mother and father walking up to the cottage, and Mummy and I, Dirk under his umbrella. We were out all the time. We didn't spend a lot of time in the garden. We seemed to go off, down to the village or that sort of thing. We had a wonderful childhood. We had a lovely time.
The Van den Bogarde family home was in the London suburb of Twickenham, and the cottage in Sussex was actually a holiday house rented by their father. The atmosphere at home was not always easy, and Dirk and his sister spent more time with Lally than they did with their parents. Their mother, Margaret, was a flamboyant Scottish ex-actress who gave up a promising stage career to marry their father and consoled herself by drinking. Their father, Ulrich, spent his entire professional life as the art editor of The Times. He had been badly shell-shocked in the First World War and was often depressed and withdrawn. In 1933, Dirk's family life was complicated even further.
He reacted to my birth with some dismay, and I think loathing. Probably the loathing came later, but certainly initially with terrible dismay, simply because he was also sent away to Scotland at the same time, because I think my mother thought it was too much for her really to have my sister and Dirk growing up and a new baby, albeit 12, nearly 13 years apart. And so he got sent off, and he never really ever forgave me for it.
In 1934, at the age of 13, Dirk was sent to live with his mother's sister and her husband in a suburb of Glasgow called Bishop Briggs. He was only allowed south in the holidays, and for the 3 years he spent there, he was almost permanently miserable. He loathed his aunt and uncle, and 40 years later he took his revenge by writing a wicked account of them in his first book.
"I have told you repeatedly about cutting your toenails," said my uncle. "Every bath time. We're not made of money up here, you know. There's a depression on." He never ever mentioned my toenails. They was frequently in the bathroom on Friday nights, which was the allotted time of the week for my ablutions, as he called them. At first I'd been rather surprised that he seemed to wish to brush his hair at such an odd hour in the evening. And when I once only locked the door, I was firmly admonished not to do so again, because how would they help if the geyser blew up or I had a fainting fit suddenly? They, after all, were responsible. So no locked doors.
It was a great shame that it was published before my aunt and uncle had died, because inevitably it wounded them terribly, because he made them appear rather monstrous people in different ways. He made out that my uncle was a strong sort of slightly malicious disciplinarian. He even hinted at sort of unhealthy interest in him sexually, which I personally think is absolute nonsense. There's no such thing. He was much kinder to my aunt, but nevertheless made out that she was overbearing and fussy in a way which he contrasted ill with his mother's way of doing things.
Dirk went to a school called Allen Glen, which specialised in preparing boys for professions like medicine and engineering. He later said that his English accent, his smart suits and suede shoes made him an obvious target.
With one united lunge, they grabbed me and dragged me struggling in nameless terror to the lavatory at the end of the room. I was hustled into the cabin, upended into the lavatory pan, held firmly by my knees and legs, while someone, as if it was from 100 miles down the tunnel, said, "Fucking push twit, talking so laddie I need a wee mouthwash now." Someone pulled the train and I thought that I drowned. Gasping and choking, vomiting like a dog on the wet, slimy floor, I was told that until I learned to speak correctly, this would happen again.
My desk mate, we sat two to a bench like slaves in the galleys, was called Tom. He was dark, thin, pleasant-looking, with round tin glasses. He showed me where to hang my cap and coat, where my locker was, where the lavatories were, the classrooms I would use, and where to eat our lunch if we didn't go home, which neither of us did.
Do you recognise yourself?
Yes, I think I must be Tom. I didn't have glasses in those days, but I did sit beside him when we started school in 1934. He was a very sort of private person, told me a lot about his life and experiences until he arrived at school, and made it quite clear to me that he was going back to his previous life as soon as he could get away from Allen Glen again. But I went to a house in Bishop Briggs where he stayed with his aunt, and I met his aunt. And I can remember the house being a smallish house with low ceilings and rather more modest than I had anticipated from Derek's account of his previous life. In fact, I had prepared rather more carefully than usual because I thought I was visiting a palace.
Just before he went to Glasgow, Dirk met his paternal grandfather for the first time. Amy van den Bogarde had not been seen by any of the family since he disappeared in 1899 in the jungles of South America, where he'd gone to collect rare wild orchids. In 1931, he reappeared in Brighton. He'd been earning his living as a painter of fake old masters, which he sold to local pubs in exchange for drink. Dirk was captivated by this exotic figure who had abandoned his previous existence and lived a life of adventure all over the world. The family have never discovered where he had lived or what he had done in the intervening 30 years. He specialized in faking hunting scenes and portraits of royalty like Anne of Cleves, whom he told his grandson Dirk was an ancestor.
I, of course, was mesmerized by him. I was happy to sit in a chair beside him in his smelly, crowded studio, looking at his stamp albums, his maps of the Amazon, faded and torn, his piles of old magazines and books, or just listen to him talking in his heavy accent about his journeys in the Andes on a mule, or his astonishing voyage on a sailing ship from Lima to Valparaiso. But more than that, he wouldn't give away. And the stories had a vague, not quite true but could be, quality about them, which in no way diminished their delight.
Grandfather Aimé was also a living link with the European side of the family. These Van den Bogardes lived in a small town in Belgium called Issy-Kem, where they owned what Dirk called estates. Their main house, Chateau Wolvenhof, was occupied by the Gestapo in World War II. Dirk always maintained that his family were Dutch, not Belgian. It's highly unlikely that he ever saw the chateau, but he managed to persuade himself and everyone else that he had.
You got a message from your father to say that when you were fighting, that you ought to go and help relieve the family village.
Yes.
Which we don't know about, do we?
No, we don't know about that one. Do you want that too?
But if you could...
Don't think we've got time, I'll make it very quick.
Yeah.
Right, in the war, right?
Yeah, in which you fought?
In which I fought. My father, who was on the Times, said, if you get near the family village, do go and liberate it. Because they've been overlooked, because we were all flying up to Antwerp. Mm. And so I found the family village, and I went with my driver and a chum from the RAF, and we drove in a jeep and found the family village. I said what I was, what my name was and all that, and a very elderly man, sweet man, suddenly came out of all the crowd. They were so happy to be, you know, they were having their little liberation with the flags. And so this man knelt very sweetly and kissed my hand. He was my grandfather's groom. So the story began to fix. And then the Burgomaster, that's the mayor of the village, said, we must take you to the family tomb. A great procession with a crucifix held in the front, and the Burgomaster, the priest, all the acolytes, the whole village came down to this labyrinthian room, which was the family vault. And there were my, I suppose, I don't know how many greats, grandfather and grandmother. And then suddenly, to my horror, 4 men arrived with crowbars. And they wrenched up, great force. The tomb lid sort of slid aside, and it was full of champagne. They'd hidden all the champagne in the village from the Germans in my grandfather's tomb.
Were you happy at the end of that?
I was blind as a bat. We all were.
Dirk always wanted to be an actor. Despite her own thwarted career, his mother encouraged his ambitions, and he later said that his own success owed everything to her. In his teens, he was unsure about his talents, and for a time, he considered becoming a designer. Like his grandfather, he was a confident artist, and in 1938 he enrolled for a year at the Chelsea School of Art in order to please his father, who regarded the theatre as insecure and ungentlemanly. Ulrich's dream was that Dirk would one day succeed him as the art editor of the Times. His own memories of the trenches inspired many of the pictures in Dirk's only surviving sketchbook, which he drew when he was appearing on stage in the West End during the Blitz.
February 7, 1941.
So he's 20?
Say he's 20, just about to be 20. And you have random scatterings, little sketches, rather frightening looking, almost Holocaustish drawing there, something deeply unpleasant happening.
The war interrupted Dirk's stage career, and in 1941 he was called up. He bought a special notebook and began a diary in which to record his experiences. This is the only volume to survive.
Awakened by Elsie, our maid, at 7:30. Had uneasy feeling inside. Realized with a start, today I start life in the army. Feels sick. Rush about, packing, etc. Family are unnaturally cheerful, me included. Leave the house at 8:45, rather grim. Wonder when I'll be back again. Next time I come back, it'll be winter. Bade farewell to mother. Beastly. Reach London with Daddy at 10. Say cheero to him. Train crowded. Soldiers, old women, conscripts like self. Journey awful. Gaze out at receding country. Wonder if I'll die and never see London again. Hope not. Awful old bitch in compartment. Says she'll vomit if I smoke. Have to stand in corridor. Arrive at camp. Bleak, barren and horrible. Have awful supper, sausages. Get shown to bunk room. Feel life has ceased forever. Fall into a troubled sleep full of train journeys. Soldiers. Far East. All mixed up with pathetic glimpses of home.
Did you actually kill anybody at all?
I personally, physically, did not kill anyone. I did, however. I was, however, responsible for the death of a great many people. Because later, one of my functions was to pick targets for bombing. And strangely enough, one of the targets I had to pick quite inadvertently was my own ancestral town of Cleves, which is now in Germany, which was then in Holland on the Dutch border. We blasted them.
Dirk spent 6 years in the army, most of it as an interpreter of aerial photographs, deciphering pictures of bombing targets. He was part of a mobile reconnaissance unit, and because his work was secret, his army records are few and far between. It's hard to establish the truth about his wartime activities because he disappeared into the maelstrom that Europe had become. But for Dirk, as for other young men, the war was certainly a turning point, and he was to emerge from it a very different person. As he later wrote in his books, "A war finds you out." Significantly, he burnt the rest of his wartime diaries, perhaps because they might have revealed too much about his private life. He later claimed to have had several affairs with women during the war, but the evidence suggests that he used these to disguise a series of relationships of a different kind.
This is Dirk's Officer's Record of Service, Army Book 439. He acquired this, obviously, at the moment of commission, which was 1943.
And this is his will.
And here you will see, dated a little later, the 30th day of May 1944, a will in which he names his father as executor, but after payment of his just debts and funeral expenses, he gives to his friend, Lieutenant J. D'Enfer Jones, RNVR, at an address in Llandudrott Wells in Flintshire. And he gives him the picture in my room of the cloth tower in Ypres and my silver ring from my left hand.
My goodness. Who is this man Jones?
I mean, you don't give a silver ring from your left hand to someone who isn't extraordinarily significant.
Tony Jones, I liked him awfully. He was a very nice man. He was older, a little older. He'd been the skipper of I think a motor torpedo boat, and had ferried Dirk either backwards or forwards during one of the beach landings, and was very seriously shot up. They had a relationship, and I don't know what sort of relationship, but I suspect it was a fairly intense one. They were very close for a long time. And I liked him. He always used to come for weekends in his naval uniform, when they did get away.
There's Tony Jones, John Nelson, and there was another one, terribly nice chap, who died, sadly. He was in the army with Dee. It was during the war that he knew a lot of these. And I used to go on the back of their motorbikes and had a lovely time. I didn't care tuppence what they, whether they were sleeping together or not. It didn't bother me one bit. And
but they were all rather handsome.
Yes, they were lovely. Yeah, one was a schoolmaster, actually. But they were. He met them in the army. Except the one that was in the Navy, Tony Jones.
What was he like?
He was very, very nice. And he went on for a long time. But none of them were anything to do with the theatre or that sort of thing. And then he met Tony Forwood, and that was it. Absolutely it.
Tom Wright, by Jove. Nick Rafferty in person. How are you?
Anthony Forwood was an aspiring actor, 5 years older than Dirk, from a prosperous middle-class family.
Are you doing well financially? Not bad at all.
Early in the war, he had seen Dirk on stage and had offered to become his manager.
Just an idea. I suppose, Nick, you couldn't let me have 100 kroner.
They met again in 1946, and Tony repeated the offer.
Any other time I'd be only too willing, but
Tony's marriage to the actress Glynis Johns had recently fallen apart, shortly after the birth of their baby son, Gareth. His meeting with Dirk quickly developed into a relationship that was more than just professional. In 1948, Tony divorced Glynis and moved to a house that Dirk had rented in Chester Row. For a time, Dirk's teenage brother, Gareth, was their lodger.
I was aware that his relationship with probably Tony in the very early days was a homosexual relationship. It didn't really mean very much to me at the time, but when I lived at the house in Chester Row, I used to, the housekeeper used to give me a tray to take upstairs in the mornings. They shared a room. I suppose I became aware of it at that time. It didn't really bother me very much. I remember Tony very well and with tremendous affection. He was very kind to me. We got on because I like cars and things like that, and Tony loved cars and had had a wonderful collection of cars in the 30s, and so we always had that in common. Dirk used to get very cross if I spent too much time talking with Tony about motor cars, and you'd hear him whistling in the background, and then he'd come bustling in and saying, what are you on about? What are you two talking about? What's so important? And break it up.
From the very beginning, Tony and Dirk kept a record of their life together in the form of photograph albums. But they took great care not to publicize the nature of their relationship, which at the time would have been considered illegal. Tony gave up his own ambition to be an actor and devoted himself to promoting Dirk's career. In 1947, Rank Studios offered them a film contract, and Dirk appeared in a number of conventional leading roles before the opportunity he and Tony had been waiting for arrived in 1950.
At the Old Bailey, Mr. Justice Finnemore, in passing sentence, gave this plain answer.
This is perhaps another illustration of the disaster caused by insufficient numbers of police. I have no doubt that one of the best preventives of crime is the regular uniformed police officer on the beat.
The Blue Lamp was made to reassure the public about the recent rise in juvenile crime. Dirk played a homicidal young delinquent living on the wrong side of the law.
What protection has the man in the street against this armed threat to his life and property?
Where'd you get that?
Bought it.
What for?
You got one of these in your hands, people listen to you.
I don't like it. Tom, please, it might go off.
Doesn't make a lot of noise.
No, Tom, don't. Tom!
Scares you, don't you?
What do you want to frighten me for?
Don't you remember what I'm going to tell you? You don't know nothing. You understand?
Even as a small boy, I mean, oh yes, he could act the part, good or bad, but it wasn't the thing that I liked him in. I'd rather him be in something lighter.
Scram! They rumbled us! Get moving!
It wasn't my boy.
The central event in the Blue Lamp was a crime which is shocking even by contemporary standards.
Get back!
Drop that and don't be a fool. Drop it, I say.
I'll drop you. Get back! This thing works! Get back! Get back, I say! Get back!
His character revealed a menace in Dirk that previous films hadn't explored, but Rank told him there were no more mixed-up delinquent parts. The post-war public preferred a diet of escapism and nostalgia, and they proceeded to cast Dirk in a series of romantic leading roles. Under Tony's constant guidance, his career went from strength to strength.
Tony was a tremendously intelligent, controlling influence. It was a business partnership, a creative partnership, a tremendous common sense partnership. Tony was a hugely good leader in all his business affairs, and really kept an eye on what was, what Dirk was earning, how it was managed, and so on. He was brilliant.
Rank groomed Dirk until he became their most popular screen heartthrob.
It must be a relief to know you haven't got to do that tonight.
Yes, it is in a way.
I don't understand how you ever get used to it.
I never have and I never will.
The rank publicity machine created an image which exploited what Dirk called his little boy looking for God looks. He and Tony colluded in a disguise which promoted Dirk's air of mystery and emphasized his seeming availability.
I'd awfully like to see you again sometime.
I'll save you a place in the shelter.
I'll be in London by the end of the month.
I live at 49 Mount Square, Weston 0009. You'd better write it down.
I think I'll remember it.
Now, come on, hurry along. Hold tight, please.
In 1954, Dirk was given the leading role in a comedy which became one of the most successful films of the decade. His performance as the lovable Dr. Simon Sparrow turned him overnight into Rank's most bankable property.
Come over here, boy. You can't learn surgery from the doorpost. Now remember, although it looks easy to you gentlemen, I've been doing this operation for 20 years. All right to start, Stubbins?
And rather delightful, aren't I? That was me. Typecasting, I was an anaesthetist.
The film also transformed the life of its creator, an Oxford anaesthetist called Richard Gordon, who wrote the book in his spare time and was able to retire on the proceeds.
Hang on to your swab.
The book came out, and Betty Box, who produced it, she wanted something to read on a railway journey, and she read it and said she wanted to make a movie of it, and we were all rather surprised. And I think we were all surprised that the movie was an enormous success, so much so that it recovered its production costs, quite a lot, during its premiere in Leicester Square.
Swab. I ought to do everything.
Dirk was invaluable in his excellent playing of the butt. Getting the laughs by being the butt is very difficult. And all that whole movie depended on him being charming and bemused and getting the laughs. We shot it all at Pinewood, which of course was lovely in those days. It was rather like making films in a country club. It was in the middle of the countryside, and you go into this lovely baronial hall for lunch, rather like some ancient college or something, and everyone had their table set down there. There was a nice bar.
As a star, Dirk was assigned a personal stand-in to relieve him of the tedium of the technicalities which accompanied every shot.
Dirk always sat along here, either one of the two tables here on a table for two, unless somebody joined us or him or is with any, but invariably along here. And he always faced up toward the steps because he loved to see what we used to call the three steps, people coming down. You would get the type that maybe a young actor was sort of doing his hair and, you know, the tie and all that bit, and slowly, casually come down and casually walk through the restaurant, either to a table or invariably to the bar. Everybody knew each other in those days, you know. It was a studio system. Betty Box, Ralph Thomas, they sort of had their table. It was happy families, and he also, at times, entertained. You know, I mean, somebody may be visiting him, like Ingrid Bergman or somebody like that, who he was always very friendly with. Or on rare occasions, maybe Tony, you know, but Tony very, very rarely came to the studio during the day. He was too busy running his other business, you know, their business.
Here we are, two very bewildered people. Here we are, two babes that are lost in the wood. But we're not quite certain what's happened to us. This lovely thing that's so marvelous, but right from here, the future looks awfully good.
In 1953, Dirk and Tony moved to Beale House in Buckinghamshire, down the road from Pinewood.
Famous lovers, we'll make them forget. From Adam and Eve, down to Scarlet and Red.
They bought a 16mm film camera, which Tony mainly used, to record their increasingly glamorous world.
Two happy people who sat on the square. Oh, isn't ours a lovely love affair?
For the next 10 years, he kept a filmed diary of the life they shared together.
Here we are with everything changed completely. wandering in a new and in a wonderful land. We may only just be a girl and a boy, but since we've found such moments of joy, we know for us that everything's sure to be grand. Because our love affair was meant to be. It's me for you, dear, and you for me. Oh, we'll fuss, we'll quarrel, and tears will start to brew, but after the tears, our love will smile through. I'm sure that I could never hide the thrill I get when you're by my side. And when we're older, we'll proudly declare, oh, wasn't ours a lovely love affair?
Just along there, around the corner, was a goldfish pond, or a fish pond. And I had a goldfish in there called Monday. I wanted a fair on a Monday. If he's still there, it must be Friday or Saturday by now. The dogs were called Sinu and Bogey. Sinu was called that because Dirk had been offered a film in Hollywood called The Egyptian, which he wisely turned down. And so his character was called Sinu, so he named the dog after that. We decided that he was my, well, I always called him, as a young boy, I always called him Uncle D. And he was and then he called himself my nominal godfather, which he wasn't actually my godfather. So he was always referred to as Uncle D. And which seemed to be a very nice way of putting it. You know, that seemed to be appropriate, even though he wasn't. If Dirk was filming, which he normally was, I think my father would get up at the appropriate hour of probably 5:36 or something and drive Dirk to the studio if he was first call, which he usually was. And then he might stay for a bit of brekkie or something, but he'd then drive back to the house and he would deal with all the paperwork with the secretary and stuff, of the running of the house, go and do the shopping or whatever. Then at about 4 o'clock he would drive back to pick Dirk up, and I'd usually come along. So then he'd be home about 6 o'clock, 6:30, and read the papers, have a drink, have a spot of supper, and I think Dirk always made sure that he went to bed by 10 o'clock, I think, was the kind of rule. And at that point, he was at the time of the sort of being mobbed wherever he went, rather like a pop star is now.
Oh, Tony, I love you so much.
In the 1950s, Dirk became Britain's biggest box office attraction. He was voted Best Actor 5 years in a row, and he acquired a huge female following.
It was actually a very hard-working lifestyle. I mean, my father, you know, one way or another, didn't stop doing what he had to do during the day, and Dirk doing what he had to do. But yes, it was, you could say, a charmed life.
Ah, there we are.
My God.
It's springtime, isn't it? Because the daffs are out.
Yes, this is Beale.
Yes, it's so pretty, isn't it?
Yes,
Lovely.
it is. Good Lord.
Sino and Bergie.
Sino and Bergie,
Yeah.
yes.
They're lying in the right place, aren't they?
Oh,
I know,
God.
get bitten by that parrot.
Shitty parrot.
Polly.
Polly the parrot,
Yeah.
who only actually liked Dirk, and loathed everybody else and bit them to the
I
bone.
know, it was a rough bird.
It was a rough bird,
Yeah.
actually.
Look at the flowers.
Mind you, I think it's just bitten him to the bone, so it's not all bad.
There are pots. There's my pots.
Yes,
Mm.
there are your pots.
There are my pots.
The very
Aren't they
pots,
nice?
yes.
Very pretty house.
One of the
Tony,
reasons he-
bless his heart. Oh, that's
Yes,
very
I
good of
know.
Tony. Yes. It's Gareth. It's Gareth Forwood.
It is, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, it
What
is.
a nice-looking boy he was.
Yeah.
No, that is so sweet of him. Oh, oh, tortoise. A lovely tortoise in the garden. I don't remember the tortoise. Now, who's this? Mummy, my mother, and my father. That's terrible.
How brilliant.
My goodness, she looks marvellous.
Maggie playing well to camera.
Oh, doesn't she look good? She looks like a film star. Oh my God, they're all kissing each other. Daddy looks pretty good, doesn't he?
does.
Now that's inside the sunroom, I think, isn't it? Again.
No, darling, that's the little sitting room next to it.
Oh right. That's me.
Indeed.
Oh my God. There's Mark.
And there's me.
Oh, how sweet.
Yes.
Beale House became a weekend retreat for visiting Hollywood stars, who enjoyed its country house atmosphere and were happy to observe the privacy that Dirk and Tony expected of them. Legends like Ava Gardner and Gene Simmons were caught by Tony's camera.
Dirk always humiliated me dreadfully, and he would introduce me as, oh, this is my little brother. My small brother comes from the farm, you know. He was terribly into that, so that I always felt then instantly awkward, and I thought I got mud on my boots, and I just felt badly dressed, and it was dreadfully humiliating. And there was a time when he suggested I really ought to call him Sir, because that's how it was in the 19th century. You know, somebody in that position would be addressed as Sir by a younger brother. I felt it was all hugely pretentious. I did think it was pretentious. I remember him coming down one day at Beale House, very early days, when he had discovered Old Spice. It was the latest thing from America. I thought, God, that's an incredible smell. And he said, and you could do with some of it. I've never forgotten that, and I was so upset. And I remember my mother was there, and she said, no, he mustn't get upset, he doesn't mean it. I thought, yes, he does.
Dirk had already turned down several overtures from Hollywood, but in 1959 he agreed to play the lead in a lavish film about the composer Franz Liszt called Song Without End. He and Tony travelled by liner to New York and flew on to Los Angeles. But they had made an unfortunate choice for Dirk's American debut. He was starring in a biopic.
What was the first film you made in Hollywood?
The first film I made in Hollywood was The Life of Franz Liszt.
Oh, Franz Liszt?
Yeah, it's a bio.
A bio. And what was that like as an experience?
Hell.
Was it really?
Absolute hell.
Tell us.
Well, it's awfully boring. I've written all about it, really. Well, anyway,
Well,
I had to play France. I had to play France, right? And I thought, well, all right, I've got to go to Hollywood. The money was enormous, and I'd never been there. And I thought, well, I'm nearly 40, and it's about time I went and, you know, could say I'd been to Hollywood, did something. So I went there because the script was unspeakable. I mean, there were lines really like, hey, do you know my friend? This is George Sand. That's your friend Chopin. This is Schubert. Come on and meet George Sand. The point was that I had to play Franz Liszt's music on that damn piano. And I can't play a Jewish harp. Anyway, the long and the short was I was given 2 dummy keyboards, a hotel suite, a rather nice little Russian Jewish man called Victor Haller, and the entire stack of records of all Liszt's music that he was playing in the film.
Hollywood in the late 50s was very far from the cosy world of Pinewood. The studios demanded total obedience from their employees, and they could make or break even established stars. Dirk and Tony had walked into a situation over which they no longer had any control. Nevertheless, they rented a house in West Hollywood, bought a large Chevrolet, and set out to make the most of this new opportunity. But there were signs that not all was well with the production. They flew to Vienna to shoot the film in authentic European locations.
It was all quite chaotic and eventually disastrous. We ploughed on miserably, and then, most fortunately, 3 weeks into the disaster, the director died of a heart attack in his bed. On we went, less appallingly, but just as wretchedly. It is the most awful feeling to know that you've backed a loser long before it's got anywhere near the winning post.
One consolation was Dirk's co-star. She was a beautiful ex-model called Capucine.
Capucine is the French word for nasturtium. In Italian, it means a type of coffee drink, cappuccino. Capucine was also the name of the woman I came to love. Properly love, I mean.
Capucine and Dirk began a peculiar courtship, which was taken up by the press and captured on film by Tony.
I said how much I loved her, how well we got on together, and how I was getting on in age, and that it was about time I started a family, and that I wanted her to share that with me, would she? She was wonderfully kind, gentle, kissed me but said no.
Oh, look, that's, Capucine.
It is. It is.
Yes, it is. She was a very sweet person, Capucine. She stayed a lot with Dirk.
Well, he says he was in love with her.
Well, yes, so he said. She's very pretty, isn't she?
Dirk always relied on the discretion of his family and friends, and Elizabeth often travelled with him.
Perhaps I was useful in that respect. See what I mean? Being his sister, it was, you know, I had a sort of... in all honesty, I think I used to be taken on these holidays, which I simply loved. I'm not saying... George didn't go, my husband. It was usually me. And he'd ring up in the morning and say, Tony and I are going down to Nice or something tomorrow. Tomorrow, you either come or you don't come. You've got to make up your mind now. And so he'd put the receiver down, and I'd absolutely think, what am I going to do with Mark? You know, because he was only a little baby then. And of course I had a lovely time.
I think it was probably very good for Dirk to have a
It
gal
was
on his
to have
arm.
a lady around, I think so.
And especially as it happened to
But
be
as
you.
I didn't mind, it didn't matter. I had a lovely time, so. I think deep down I did feel that a wee bit, but I could be wrong. I wanted to go. And I loved going with Tony. They were such fun to be with. And they were heaven. The holidays there wasn't one hiccup on any of the holidays. And we stayed at some jolly nice places.
After the fiasco in Hollywood, Dirk made a conscious decision to take a risk and play a villain every bit as evil as the delinquent teenager in The Blue Lamp. He put on a pair of black leather trousers and went brazenly onto the offensive in a film which at the time was considered outrageous, but has since become a cult classic.
That's singing up the song. I think he acted very well. In everything he did, he acted very well. But camp, I have to use the word camp, you know, not queer, but camp. That was the whole idea, because originally it was supposed to be Marlon Brando and Frank Sinatra, I think it was. Yeah. But Rank owned it and said, no, we want these two.
The Singer, Not the Song was shot in Torremolinos in 1960. Dirk played a Mexican bandit called Anacleto, who is sadistic, amoral, and sexually ambiguous. The director, Roy Baker, had just made the first series of The Avengers, and the film was deliberately provocative. It allowed Dirk to send up his own image and find a way, at 39, of becoming a different kind of sex symbol. It was also a way of challenging Hollywood at its own game. Bogarde had now made more than 30 films, and as a star he was as productive as ever. But he was determined to explore more demanding territory as an actor. At the end of the 1950s, his career was about to take a new direction. His adoring fans were completely unprepared for Bogarde's next film, in which he plays a middle-aged man who has a secret life.
Aren't you? Now I'm on my way to get ya! Where's your little lair this time?
Puss, 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 pussy,
I'm getting warm. You're hiding. You'll be caught. Getting warmer. You've got a guilty secret. You've got a guilty secret. But you'll be caught. I'm coming to get you. I'm creeping up on you. I can smell a rat.
can smell a...
What?
In 1961, Dirk Bogarde was 40. He had been living with Anthony Forwood for 13 years. In public, Dirk always referred to Tony as his manager, and even in private, he was as secretive as ever about their relationship.
I never saw Tony alone, ever. Even on holiday. It was always the three of us, always sitting on the beach together and that sort of thing. It's very strange. There were a lot of questions I couldn't ask him, which made a little bit of a blockage between our conversation. I mean, I couldn't talk to him as I talked to all of you.
Could you ask him about Tony?
No.
No.
Oh, no.
That
He was
was
a terribly
taboo.
private person. I knew what I could ask him and I knew what I couldn't ask him.
What couldn't you ask him?
Well, I didn't discuss Tony, for instance, with him, or... No. If he wanted to tell me something, he'd tell me. But if he didn't, he wouldn't. They were living together so fine, perfectly marvellous, you know. He was such a nice man, I couldn't have been happier, really. He was always there. Tony never went away on his own, and vice versa. I don't think there was a night they were apart, really. Extraordinary.
What do you think he would have done if you'd asked him something?
Mind your own business. Very sharply. And that was that. And I would never have wanted to fall out with him because I know he would have never have wanted to see me again.
Put him through. Barrett, if I hear from you again, I shall inform the police. Do you understand? That's absolutely final.
In his next film, Bogarde selected a subject that no other actor was willing to explore. It took him into uncharted territory for British cinema, which was also dangerously close to home. In Victim, he played a respectable barrister who is caught up in a web of blackmail because he has a secret life.
You'd been paying for months to stop copies of this going around the temple.
Why is he crying?
I just told him we couldn't see him anymore.
So he knew it was the end. And so did you.
Sylvia Sims played his wife, Laura.
Look at the picture. There's as much pain in your face as there is in his. You were attracted to that boy as a man would be to a girl.
Laura, don't go on. For God's sake, stop now.
I can't stop. I love you too much to stop. I thought you loved me. If you do, what did you feel for him? I have a right to know.
All right, you want to know. I shall tell you. You won't be content until you know, will you? Till you ripped it out of me. I stopped seeing him because I wanted him. Do you understand? Because I wanted him! Now, what good has that done you?
I don't suppose he had to choose this film. He must have been offered other things. But he did choose it, you see.
I can't stop. I love you too much to stop. I thought you loved me. If you do, what did you feel for him?
And he obviously felt about it very passionately because in the scene,
You won't be content until you know, will you?
it was terrible
Till you ripped it out of me.
and deeply moving.
I stopped seeing him because I wanted him. Do you understand? Because I wanted him! Now, what good has that done you?
The lawyer who read the script of Victim for the first time said he could find nothing libelous in it, but he wished that he could wash his hands and his mouth. Now, come on. You know,
It wasn't such a great deal.
I don't think it occurred to me then that Dirk was perhaps homosexual. I don't know. I don't think it occurred to me. I was just the woman, being the woman and imagining how I'd feel if a man as lovely as him, and whom I'd loved for a long while, turned around and said, well, actually, I wanted this boy.
I'm an actor who works from outside in, rather than the reverse. Once I can wear the clothes which my alter ego has chosen to wear, I can begin the process of his development from inside the layers.
In Joseph Losey's The Servant, Bogarde plays a sinister and manipulative manservant. It was a disreputable role in a low-budget film, which he approached with enormous relish.
A tight, shiny, worn blue serge suit, black shoes which squeaked a little, lending a disturbing sense of secret arrival, a pork pie hat with a jay's feather, a mean, shabby outfit for a mean and shabby man.
Excuse me, sir.
Losey raised the money to make the film on the strength of Bogarde's name, and it was shot in the winter of 1962.
My name's Barrett, sir.
Oh, God, of course. I'm so sorry I fell asleep. We've got an appointment.
Yes, sir.
What time?
3 o'clock, sir.
Oh, what time is it now?
3 o'clock, sir.
Ooh. Too many beers at lunch, that's what it is. Do you drink beer?
No, I don't, sir.
What do you think of the house?
It's very nice, sir.
Needs a lot done with it, of course.
Harold Pinter's screenplay centres on the shifting balance of power as Barrett manipulates and corrupts his aristocratic master, Tony. Eventually, their roles are reversed as Barrett takes control of Tony and his house.
Barrett!
Tony was played by a young actor in his first leading role, called James Fox.
What's the matter with you?
Get out of it.
What you doing?
There's tea dregs on the carpet.
Where?
In the drawing room.
Well, I didn't put them there.
Now, here you are. Use it.
Don't do that to me.
Clear it up!
It's not my fault, them tea dregs.
Oh, you filthy bastard!
Right. I'm leaving.
It's exactly what I want.
You talk to me now.
I'll leave my house
After
alone.
all I've done for you.
Get down and clear it up!
You're not going to stand for any more of this.
Take your pigsty somewhere else!
It's not my pigsty, it's yours.
You creep!
Nobody talks to me like
Do you know what you are?
I know all about your son.
You're a peasant.
Peasant, am I? Get out of the way. I'll show you what I am. I'll tell you what I am. I'm a gentleman's gentleman, and you're no bloody gentleman.
Oh, you think I'm past it? Well, I hadn't had a drink all morning. I'm through with it. Oh, I'll knock your head off.
Violence will get you nowhere.
If you don't get down on
I think there's a latent violence in Dirk, an attraction towards violence.
You're funny.
I wonder if the kind of the social climbing aspect isn't there as well. That, you know, he aspired to a class that he might not have felt he belonged to. And it just struck me, that line there, you know, I'm a gentleman's gentleman and you're no bloody gentleman. It's good, isn't it?
Just a Beaujolais, sir, but a good bottler.
A good what?
Butler.
The most obvious thing is this sort of the domination thing. Dominating and being dominated. Must have been attracted by that. The implied homosexuality. I mean, he's got a beautiful young man who he can corrupt and control. I mean, that presumably was a big turn-on for him. Also, he likes Tony and he admires him and he's jealous of his beauty and superiority. So it's perfect.
It's this, it's waxed, so will wane soon. 5 letters.
Why don't you get yourself a job instead of mooning about the house all the time?
No, I can't.
Here I am, scraping and skimping, trying to make ends meet, getting worse and worse. You're no bloody help either. Do you know that butter's gone up 2p a pound?
As a matter of fact, I'll be meeting a man very shortly.
What man? The man from Brazil? What's he going to do for you? Come down by helicopter on the roof, is that it?
Oh, why don't you shut up?
Ford was doing something to the car. I don't exactly know what he was doing because I don't know anything about cars.
Bogarde and Tony Forwood succeeded in persuading the outside world that theirs was a purely professional partnership. Dirk never discussed Tony in public, and he always referred to him by his surname in his later autobiographies.
Tony Forwood. A very likable man, very funny man. Enjoyed probably being a little bit subservient. And when he had to serve Dirk's career, he had to, he had to keep Dirk's ego happy, and yet Dirk was very, very dependent on him. So there's a mutual dependence, clear roles defined, I think. Do you think there's some parallels between sort of Tony Barrett and Tony Dirk? I think Tony opened the door for the servant, for Joe Losey. I think he woke Dirk's mind up and woke him up to what was going on. Tony probably read more newspapers and more information. His ear was attuned to what was going on. I think he was very important in that respect. So maybe Tony in The Servant would have grown up to be Tony Forwood.
That's good.
What's good?
No, just that picture of my father and myself, yeah. Nice sort of... It was marvellous. That was wonderful that week.
How did you get on?
With Dirk? Oh, very well. Oh, yeah, very well. I can't describe why, we just did, He was very good to me, and we conversed well.
Gareth Forwood was Tony's son from his marriage to the actress Glynis Johns. He was only 2 years old when his parents were divorced and his father moved in with Bogarde. Tony and Glynis maintained an amicable relationship, and Gareth spent a great deal of time with Dirk and his father. For the few years after The Servant, Bogarde effectively followed a double career. He appeared as a romantic lead opposite some of the most fashionable actresses of the day. But his portrayal of Barrett also propelled him into the centre of the new wave in British cinema, in voguish films such as Darling and Modesty Blaze.
Nor on a lovely summer's day. It was the most wonderful house. Well, it was a village more than a house, really. I mean, it had barns and outhouses and garages and cinemas, and it was huge. Dirk did the garden. Because he would never trust Toad to do it. Toad once pruned the lilac tree and nearly got killed for it. He was always known as Toad. I don't ever remember anybody calling him, unless they called him Mr. Forwood. I don't remember them calling him anything but Toad. He was known as Toad and was totally divine. Oh, yes, tea time in the garden. Wonderful.
In 1962, Dirk and Tony moved to a new house in Surrey called Knorr Farm.
We're down for the weekend, which was a sort of ongoing thing, which was lovely. We just used to laugh a lot and relax at Knorr for the weekend.
You any brothers? Or sisters?
One sister.
Is she beautiful?
Very.
Come for a walk? Hmm?
Oh, I'm so comfortable.
In the summer of 1967, Dirk starred in a second collaboration between Joe Losey and Harold Pinter. Accident, set in the home counties, revealed Losey's distaste for British middle-class life.
Like all the greatest directors, Losey never tells one what to do or how to do it, ever. Only what not to do, which is very different. You give him your character and he will watch it develop, encouraging or modifying, always taking what is offered and using it deftly.
Dirk was the same age as his character, Stephen, and he even wore his own clothes during the filming.
I think I'll go for a walk.
I'll come too.
They were wonderful to me. I was welcomed into their home. They had this wonderful house, and it was a huge thrill to drive down. It was great, and we sort of sat at his foot, admiringly. It's acolytes. Almost like the repeat of the great party and accident. That long, lazy summer day.
Describe to me what we're all doing.
Rosalind's lying down. Stephen's weeding the garden. Anna's making a daisy chain. We're having this conversation.
Good. But then you could go further. Rosalind is pregnant. Stephen is having an affair with a girl at Oxford. He's reached the age where he can't keep his hands off girls at Oxford.
What?
But he feels guilty, of course. So he makes up a story.
What story?
This story.
What are you talking about?
These flies are terrible.
Pinter doesn't give you instructions like a packet of instant minestrone.
Their Sicilian horse.
The instructions are implicit in the words he offers so sparingly for his characters to speak.
Have you heard our conversation?
Yes.
Yes.
Tony, or Forwood, it was very odd. It was this sort of English public school appellation. Forwood, you know, like Barrett. I think he made, you know, Dirk's life pleasurable. He was certainly there in terms of, you know, making the household work. It wasn't, you know, it was a relationship, but it wasn't, you know, an obvious relationship. You know, you weren't sure what or who or what particular function Tony had. I think maybe this, you know, this inability to be totally, you know, frank about this was terrible. And this is what's so interesting about Dirk, that he is so complex. He's so difficult to pin down. He's so contradictory. He's saint one moment, sinner the next. He's a lot of very interesting things that don't necessarily come together in a homogeneous whole.
Well, my father's taking it as he mostly took it. It was his camera, which was most opulent for the time because it was 16mm. If people had home cine, it was usually 8mm and very often black and white. So this was very expensive stuff, but it was his camera and his toy, as it were, and he was in charge of it and decided more or less if anyone else was going to take it, who it was going to be, and what it was going to be. I think he was trying to, through these few years, give a picture of that life, which now we're very glad he has.
Bogarde's sophisticated performances in films like Accident caught the attention of several European directors, and he started working so frequently in Europe that he and Tony Forwood decided to leave England and set up a permanent home in France. In 1970, they bought an isolated farmhouse in Provence, where they were to live for the next 17 years.
I've got a very pretty house in south of France with 10 acres of land, which is not bad. And I have saved and been careful and cautious. But I'm not rich, Christ.
But you're nearly 50 now.
Yes.
Does that concern you professionally?
Oh, no, I'm getting the right parts now. No, 50's a super age. Why? Why worry? It doesn't matter. I think it's absolutely idiotic to talk a few years. I mean, if I had a great paunch and I was sort of lumbering around and wheezing and hadn't looked after myself, I should be a bit miserable. I think 50's super.
So personally, getting older doesn't bother you at all?
No, I think it's marvellous because, you know, there's so much to do presently. It's so much nicer to be old in this time than it used to be. You were sort of put away at 50 about sort of 40 years ago. Now it's, it's perfectly all right. You can walk around in jeans and nobody seems to mind. I think it's a dead age, do you?
In his middle age, Bogarde was to play the role that would secure his place in cinema history. In 1970, the great Italian director Luchino Visconti was planning his next film, an adaptation of Thomas Mann's novella Death in Venice, about a writer who becomes obsessed with a young boy he meets in a Venice hotel. Visconti was the reigning emperor of European cinema, and at the age of 63, he was drawn to the theme of beauty and mortality in Mann's story.
Was it the idea of death which seduced you most about this short story?
Not especially that, you know, but this kind of death, who is an intellectual death, you know, is a story of an intellectual who is following the beauty, the absolutely beauty in the world, and when he finds it casually in the life, you know, and he spent all his life to arrive to this, but casually he finds it in life in a young boy who lives at the leader at Hotel de Bain, then he touched with his hand that the absolutely beauty exists. And like you know, to put the eyes on the beauty is to put the eyes on the dead.
Visconti cast Bogarde as the central character, Gustav von Aschenbach, whom he had decided to make a composer.
You're playing a musician, not a writer, Aschenbach, who is a homosexual. Now,
No.
Oh, he's not?
No, not at all. Not at all. This is completely erroneous. The love affair that happens is the love affair of beauty, of a man who has 1 year to live, or is in fact dying, and he goes off to Venice to have the last summer of his life, to enjoy beauty, to enjoy everything. And he sees this child, who is the essence of innocence, of crystalline purity, of beauty. And he simply falls in love. I mean, it's not a physical homosexual love at all. Nothing to do with that at all. That must be made firm. I can't do that again.
Visconti travelled all round Europe and auditioned over 1,500 boys for the part of the youth with whom von Aschenbach falls in love.
Yeah, Margareta. Guten Tag. Bitte.
After casting Bogarde, choosing the boy to play Tadzio was the most crucial decision in the whole film.
Aschenbach noticed that the boy was flawlessly beautiful. His countenance, pale and gracefully reserved, was surrounded by ringlets of honey-coloured hair, and with its straight nose, its enchanting mouth, its expression of sweet and divine gravity, it recalled Greek sculpture of the noblest period. He, who now contemplated it, felt that he had never beheld, in nature or in art, anything so consummately successful.
Björn Andreasen was a 15-year-old from Stockholm.
Farewell, Tadzio. It was all too brief. May God bless you.
I remember that day, and I remember it being one of the first times I was slightly hungover because we had visited a discotheque the night before and had a very good time. So I was late at the set, just as in the scene. Dirk, he was very polite, very nice, and a lot of integrity from the very start. He'd sit and either reading from the script or the book, just sitting, looking out over the sea in deep thought, and mostly by himself. At all times he was deeply concentrated. He didn't even join us for lunch.
Tadzio was bathing, but already he seemed to be giving cause for alarm. Already the women's voices were calling out to him from the bathing huts. Tadzio! Tadzio! He returned. He came running, beating the resisting water to foam with his feet. his head thrown back, running through the waves, and to behold this living figure, lovely and austere in its early masculinity, with dripping locks and beautiful as a young god, this sight filled the mind with mythical images.
I've learned that Thomas Mann himself also was homosexual, so, I mean, there's a sort of a theme that goes through the making of the film. I thought maybe Dirk would feel understood by Thomas Mann. I think he might have felt invited to this story, to be this character.
And now the Signore may fall in love as soon as he pleases.
The cosmetician finally declared himself satisfied with the groveling politeness usual in such people by profusely thanking the client he'd served. And the spellbound lover departed, confused and timorous, but happy as in a dream.
What I was never aware of was that it could take so long before this movie loosened its grip around you. One of the consequences is you sort of tend to lose identity. I mean, you're not Björn Andreasson anymore. You're the cute guy from Death in Venice. And you're probably gay as well. You get all of a sudden a lot of explaining to do.
Stood. He's lusting and he's dying. At the very top of the scene, he swallows, he gulps, which is really somebody who realized something is going to happen, and it's probably not going to be very good. It's not going to be fulfilled lust. It's going to be his death fulfilled. First thing you learn about movie acting is less is more. So you learn stillness, and I think he was born good at stillness. Dirk was dark, and Dirk's darkness, just physical darkness and emanations, covered what might have been just badinage, suddenly became very sharp and rather deadly at times.
Mainland Europe, where Bogarde now lived, was a continent scarred by war. Its tragic history obsessed many of the new directors in the European avant-garde, and Bogarde shared their desire to confront the evil of the recent past, even when they consciously set out to shock.
The reaction from the major company executives was one of stunned incomprehension, followed by charges of offensiveness and insult to the Jewish faith, although there was absolutely no Jewish connection anywhere in the film, and obscenity. I thought that obscenity might perhaps have interested them, because obscenity always makes money, but this time they stuck to incomprehensible, and that was that.
We wanted it to be a love story, however strange. It had to be about love, this film. Otherwise, it was just an essay on Nazi behavior. It profoundly aroused people in many ways that they really didn't feel that they should be aroused in, but they were aroused. It's very erotic, because it's about bondage, and it's about, you know, slavery, and it's about all the sort of things that people do to each other when one has power and one doesn't have power. And that's very sexy.
In The Night Porter, Bogarde plays an ex-Nazi hiding his past identity by working as a porter in a Viennese hotel. It was a bizarre and psychologically demanding role, but one which he felt uniquely equipped to play. The film fed into his own memories of the war and the profound effect that witnessing the newly liberated concentration camps had had on him.
Only during really bad thunderstorms would I remember Belsen, and the girl, shorn head, covered in scabs, face cracked with running sores, her filthy striped skirt flapping, breast swinging like empty pockets against her rib-lined chest. And the woods, the dark pines and the earth squashy, so that tent pegs driven in slid into slime. The stench then, and the mass grave. Legs and arms and swollen heads, the bloated, the rotten, liquefying death beneath the pine needles and moss. They'd forced the people from the village to march past. The younger ones, white-faced, spat, laughing, spitting into the grave. Proud still, Germans.
The thing about filming is it can be a form of exorcism, and it can be a form of tremendous release. And I think the reason he eventually wanted to do Night Porter was to somehow release himself of the guilt, of the fear, of the terrors and the horrors that I'm sure that he'd been through in the war. He would go into denial about a lot of things. You know, he just couldn't sort of take actually what was happening. You could see he'd just sort of blank off and go and have whiskey, or you know, just sort of not. Or talk about something, you know, stupid and silly, but that you could just feel the churning and the churning and the churning. But I mean, I think it was a film that he was compelled to do.
Do you have to see something in a role that connects with you, or is it the idea of the overall film that...
No, as long as I get the best part, I don't give a shit. I did see, and this is very important, I did see the woman's work, Liliana Cavani's work on television. And she'd sent me a script called Portiere Notti, which was really a load of old cobblers. It was awful. But there was a marvelous block in it that could be cut down and made into a movie, which was true, about a woman who was in a concentration camp and who did fall in love with her guard.
Her SS guard.
Her SS guard.
1980.
Address?
Blumenstadt, 14.
Religion?
Jewish.
Next.
Non abbiamo mai parlato delle sue esperienze di guerra. Forse non ha voluto parlare, o forse non lo so, ma non abbiamo parlato. Ha capito che l'idea era molto buona e gli piaceva l'idea, la affascinava l'idea di affrontare questo. Quindi aveva capito benissimo il personaggio e quindi noi avevamo bisogno di descrivere quello che sapevamo già tutte e due. Quindi è stato molto semplice.
In my fine black and silver uniform and high-peaked cap with its death's head insignia, cracking my boots with a thin silver-topped whip, I had no illusions at all that I was not the man I was supposed to be playing. I felt exactly right. I felt frightening, powerful, commanding.
There are no lines to Frankfurt. Why did you come here? Hmm? Have you come to give me away?
Have you? Did you? Answer! Did you? Why did you come? Why did you come? Why? Why?
The character comes into him and possesses him. There's this form of possession, obsessive possession, that works, and that I think that's the alchemy that works with Dirk as a screen actor, is that kind of form of possession, and he allows it completely. Those characters were essential to him. I mean, he needed them absolutely. He needed to be able to live out his life, certain parts of his life, not his life, certain parts through those characters. He was haunted by his characters, especially the powerful characters that he's played. He was haunted by them, and so they just sort of morphed into him.
When you're by my side, and when we're older, we'll proudly declare, wasn't ours a lovely love
This was his office, where he wrote all his books and did all his business. And it's very changed now. There was a table there, and it was a very cool room. And the beams have been painted white now, but he used to sit in here with a smouldering ashtray, smoking his way through the morning, answering the telephone, writing letters. And this is where he started to write his first book.
Brock van den Bogarde was Dirk's favourite nephew. When he was in his teens, he stayed with Dirk and Tony in France for 8 months. He formed such a close relationship with his uncle that when Bogarde died, he left Brock the majority of his estate.
Uncle Dirk. I always called him Uncle Dirk. And Tony was as special to me as Dirk, without any doubt. Tony taught me to tap dance on this terrace. he was a great fan of musicals. In the mornings, it was a work sort of life. One got on with mowing the terraces and doing things while it was cool. And in the afternoon, everything went very quiet and sleepy, and Dirk sat and wrote in his office. They disappeared off. This house has that ability to swallow people, and you don't really know where they are or what's happened, and therefore you have to have an ability to be self-sufficient and a purpose. Otherwise, I think you'd just be consumed by the silence.
From his seclusion in the south of France, Bogarde began his new career. He was to write the first 4 parts of what would ultimately be a 7-volume autobiography, which he made sure was the only available account of his life.
He disciplined himself every day to writing in the morning, only in the mornings, and then we'd have lunch, and then in the afternoons he'd come down with a couple of pages, and Tony would take them and sort of walk back and forth, sort of, you know, and Tony was sort of his editor. He was the other person to talk to, the other person that knew about his life. They'd been together so long, so he was able to sort of discuss with him whether he was on the right track, I suppose.
The giddy idea that 2 men could run single, or is it double, handed a house and 12 acres very soon faded in a scurry of irritation and helplessness. I can't cook an egg, and practically not even boil water. Forwood agreed to do the cooking. He was good at cauliflower cheese and could grill a chicken. I was to be the scullion, preparing the vegetables and doing the washing up. I frequently thought I'd got the worst part of the deal. Madame Brunner, the mason's wife, did the heavy laundry, and I stuck the tea cloths and underpants in bushels of persil and hung them on the line.
Who cooked? Tony cooked. He did all the cooking. He was a very good cook. And Dirk helped. But Dirk was writing and working, and Tony sort of looked after that end of things, and so they didn't sort of fight over the shopping list. This was Dirk's room. There was a bed here and a black and white tiled floor, a linoleum floor, which I found rather startling. And in contrast to Tony's room, they were completely different.
Forwood came down from somewhere above with a clatter and a panting of the dogs at his heels, went down to the bar cupboard to fix his Bloody Mary. What's up? Is this the last tin of tomato juice, for God's sake? There's more in the cellar. I got it yesterday.
And this is Tony's room, which had a great big bed. It was more like a nursery than a bedroom. It was a wonderful room. It really reflected his character, and he had all his things. A big teddy bear on the bed. It seemed perfect when one lived here. It really didn't need anything else. The house had a very friendly atmosphere, and they were very, very happy here.
The ever-welcoming Connaught had really now, over the years, become my London home, anyway since 1951, when I first dined there. And King Farouk had the table at which I now sit when I'm there. Things have altered rather over the years.
We're now on the 3rd floor, and we're getting towards Sir Dirk's favourite suite.
Apart, that is, from the familiarity and absolute perfection.
Did he always have a corner suite? Yes, he did. He really enjoyed these traditional suites.
Dirk Bogarde, he of the orchards, now lives in an orchard of olive trees in the south of France, and he's flown in to be with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Dirk Bogarde.
This is a suite that he particularly enjoyed, but at that time, the colours have changed. He particularly liked a green, and in those days, the suite was different shades of green. We have the bathroom here on the left.
How often would he come?
He used to come perhaps 3 or 4 times a year and stay for a number of weeks at a time when he was over here. A little bit more regularly Towards the end, before he moved over to England permanently, he had to come over here more regularly with Anthony Forwood.
How much of your past film career, how much is responsible for the fact that you are now a popular and successful writer?
Nothing. Oh, well, my name, yeah. My movie star name sells books.
Does it?
Yeah.
But how
well,
much...
they tell me.
Are you proud of anything you've done?
Proud of anything I've done? No, find another word.
I didn't like seeing him being interviewed because he came over as being sort of show-off-y or affected and pompous.
Well, I mean, you can't go on with this sort of gentleman for too long. You're so rude to people. I'm told, anyway.
I haven't been rude to you yet.
No, you haven't yet, but I'm waiting for it.
I'm surprised that Tony let him do it, really. I thought, that's not you. I want to say, shut up, you know.
Let's be really I'm going to be really rude to you now.
All right.
Right?
Yes.
Personal?
If I can take the rank organisation for 17 years, I can take you for 5 minutes.
Bogarde's performance on the Russell Harty show was something of a media talking point, and Harty himself became increasingly intrigued by Bogarde's persona. In 1986, he persuaded him to let him bring a television crew to France to film a long and in-depth interview. At the time, Tony Forwood was already suffering from Parkinson's disease, and Bogarde had decided that they would soon have to leave the house in France. Shortly before Harty arrived, he burnt most of his private papers.
There is a complete totality of the picture as far as I'm concerned, but it's all there if you want to read it. But if you're not very bright, you won't get it. You have to read between the lines of everything I ever write anyway.
In a part of Backcloth, you say this: the hermit crab syndrome was firmly fixed, and I only quit that shell as I grew older to find another more suited to my size, but still a shell. I dread and still do dread possession. Nobody's ever possessed you.
No.
And you've never felt the need to be possessed.
No. Family. I mean, I would mind not being possessed by family. But I have a sense of... I have no sense of possessions, if all, you know... I don't mind. As long as I've got a little bit of money in my pocket and some ciggies and my bottle of booze in the evening, that's okay.
And somebody to talk to.
Yes, I think you have to have someone to talk to. But I don't talk very much. I get loquacious on aeroplanes. But I'm still in the shell, and you haven't cracked it yet, honey.
He liked Russell Harty, and he was the interviewer that he trusted. And they came there, and they were there for about 4 or 5 days. And we were inside. There were sort of curly steps that go up to the kitchen from the long room downstairs. And Tote and I were sitting on the stairs, so we could listen through the windows. And we heard everything. And he was going, this is retread stuff. This has all been done before. So after lunch, Dirk said, I want you to throw some tough stuff at me. I don't want to answer the same questions. I don't want people to turn on their televisions and see me being asked the same thing over and over again. They've heard it all. They've read about it. They've heard about it. Try me with something else.
When you turn to the back of each of your 4 autobiographies, the name that figures most prominently and is covered most frequently is that of Tony Forwood. Now, he's your manager and he's your closest personal friend. Do you count yourself blessed in him?
Oh, yes, very much so. He found me on the stage in Rep. We made a pact that I'd go and be represented by him, and I've stayed with him ever since.
But it's more than an agent and client relationship, isn't it? Because you share this house with him.
Yeah, he's here.
Whose house is it?
Mine.
And whose taste is reflected in the house?
Difficult to say, really. It sort of grew like topsy all around us.
I mean, it is a house of exquisite taste, and it does seem to have a kind of unity on it. I wonder.
He's obviously probing at his sexuality, and as you know, he never admitted to being homosexual all his life, although one accepted that that's what they were.
When you and Forwood are here at home in the evening, and everybody... Well,
and I don't think it really mattered to Dirk in some ways. In other ways, it obviously did.
I'm inferring that we might sit down knitting and pulling rugs. Forget it. That doesn't happen
I wasn't inferring that. I was asking...
No, there are no post-mortems.
Why do you think he was so defensive about it?
Dirk was an old-fashioned sort of person in more ways than you can expect. I mean, you understand. And I think that there were lines that he drew. You know, he knew Russell Harty was going to go up that avenue. That's the avenue of the Sun. It's not the avenue of the Times and the BBC and the world in which Dirk felt he belonged. He belonged in an elegant world.
Bogarde's parents had both died whilst he was living in France, and he had never intended to return to England. In 1987, when Tony was diagnosed with cancer, they were forced to move back to London. They rented a house, and Dirk looked after Tony, who was now bedridden.
I would go up and take him his favourite drink, which was a Bloody Mary, and he'd have one little sip, because he couldn't drink it, but he'd say, absolutely delicious, you know. And then that was all he could have, but he liked it, the fact that it was there. And then I'd go back down, and Dirk and I would have a couple of scotch or whatever.
In May 1988, Tony died, and Dirk found himself alone for the first time since 1948.
Did you remain in contact with him after your father died?
No.
Why?
I don't know. It was something on his side, something on mine. Maybe he was trying to sweep the decks. Maybe I felt I needed to get from under various shadows. There was no malice in it. It just kind of went that way. I did try and make contact with him, but there was no response. I feel sad about that.
Bogarde's last address was a top-floor flat in Chelsea. He lived here on his own for the next 10 years, and the flat remains unchanged to this day.
Is that something you've ever regretted, that you haven't had children of your own?
No, I don't regret it because I'm a deeply selfish person and I'm too into it and I'm better on my own, you know.
So is there no love in you to give?
I can't say I'm an unloving person, if that's what you're trying to say. No, I'm not. But I don't really want anything further than that. I want anybody in my life. I never have. I couldn't have done my career if I'd had someone, if I'd been married to someone.
You've made it very plain from time to time that yours and Tony Forwood was not a homosexual relationship. Nevertheless, there'll always be those who will choose to believe that it was. Do you mind that? Do you resent it, or does it simply...
I resented it enormously for his family and for my own family. Of course I did. But what can you do, especially in this country, with the press we have here and the cruelty of it?
He died, as you said just now, quite recently, and you've been quite poorly, haven't you? I mean,
I had a stroke.
Bogarde managed to write 3 more novels, 3 volumes of autobiography, and a collection of journalism. He received a knighthood in 1992.
The very last time I saw him was here at the Connaught. This was his favorite place. And he was made up very discreetly, but to disguise illness, and was moving very athletically around the room, and I had an old friend, the literary critic Lorna Sage, and Lorna had come by for lunch. And I said, I hope you don't mind, Dirk Bogarde. Mind? She said, I may burst into tears. I may be out of control with lust when I see him. Anyway, they got on beautifully, and Lorna just sat there staring like a schoolgirl at Dirk, who was showing off beautifully. And he had 12 oysters for lunch. And she said, I never thought in my old age I'd be eating oysters of the Connaught with Dirk Bogarde.
Mr. Chevalier, can you show me Sir Dirk's table?
Yes, indeed. If you'd like to follow me, please.
Was it always the same table?
Usually, yes. He liked his table particularly, and most of the time we always try to arrange it so that this table would be available for him. And he liked it particularly because it was cozy, in a quiet corner, and fairly discreet as well, and that's what he liked particularly.
Did he always eat the same thing?
Occasionally he would change, but he had some preferences. He liked foie gras, it was one of his preferred starters. He liked oysters with a glass of Guinness. And as a main course, calf's liver, sole, nothing extravagant really.
He was very droll. I would not say that he invited himself as a subject for laughter. He was rather grave about himself, but he was very funny about everybody else.
He seems a very difficult nut to crack.
Yes. What would you find beyond the nut? Nothing. What is inside it?
What do you think?
I think that I don't think that there is a great deal other than the terror of which he was so afraid. The thing that, whatever it was that made him practice control, that made him such a control person, that kept him so tightly wrapped, is inside the nut. That is it. And I think if you take the lid off that, you just have screaming terror. And it's nameless.
It is natural to hope that when the time comes, we shall die peacefully, with dignity, and without prolonged suffering. Those who do so will be fortunate, for many must still endure a long, drawn-out and deeply distressing process of degeneration. Prolonged periods of pain are not the only distress some unfortunate patients have to suffer. Feelings of suffocation, of nausea, of misery, or of being desperately ill cannot always be relieved by painkillers and sedatives.
What's it like coming back to the flat?
It's very strange to be here and him not here. And this is the first time I've been back. And it's actually the same. I suppose it's like most people say, it seems a bit smaller. But I remember the light coming in. That was his most important thing for Dirk, was to have the light from these windows.
Obstruction of the bowels or incontinence. And the utter frustration makes each day and night a death in life. Likewise, patients with a stroke may be conscious but helpless. Their misery is frequently overlooked.
Originally, I intended just staying for about 6 weeks, but we got used to each other. And so it went on until he died. Yeah, the room is very strange. The whole place is coming back.
Dirk Bogarde has had not one but 2 very severe strokes.
I haven't been able to walk anywhere for a very long time. 2 years almost.
Yes, I was terribly sad, as I'm sure thousands of others were.
Well, you see, the awful thing about it is it's such a terrible shock.
Yeah.
This is the one warning about a stroke. It comes at any time. You don't know where it's going to happen. But I've been very fortunate. I've had 2 strokes. And both times I was, you know, gathered together before I fell down the lavatory stairs in the underground or something. I've always dreaded that, or crossing a road.
How incapacitated are you now?
Totally. Well, my left side is totally incapacitated, and my speech is gone, as you hear, which is a bore because I used to read my own books. But I've no way of doing that at all, so I sit here and read or watch television, which is dire.
Well, the last time I saw him, I rang from Peter Jones, which is up the road from him, and I thought, gosh, he's only up the road, and I rang and said, could I just pop in? I'll give you an hour. Could I pop in? And what are you doing up in London? I said, well, I've come up with Sarah. Why didn't you give me plenty of notice? And I said, well, I didn't know. She only phoned me last night, and you know, all that. And he said, well, it's not very convenient. So I said, oh, all right, it's just that I'd just like to have looked in for 10 minutes. And he said, oh, well, all right. And I went up, and he was in a very peculiar mood. He was in his wheelchair. And he said, you know, you really should have let me know. And I said, well, I am sorry. It was just to say hello to you, that's all. You know. And he said, well, anyway, Sheila's not in at the moment. She'll be back any minute now, so I think I better trot off. So I said, oh, all right, nice to see you. Didn't want me to kiss him goodbye. And off I went. I was terribly depressed going down in that lift. Then he rang me and said, I'm afraid I was a bit off. So I said, oh, well, you're not feeling well. He said, no, I wasn't feeling very well. I'm sorry, dear, but, you know. And that was it.
This was the bedroom. And my bedroom was immediately next door. So I could hear him, you know, during the night in case he needed anything. Genuinely, you know, usually he slept right through. And then every morning, I'd get him up and onto his wheelchair, and then we would do leg and foot massage and various treatments here within the bedroom. And then afterwards, his bathroom is just next door, so we would use this bathroom to do his bath.
I'm not a liar. I've never cheated an audience in my life. I hope I've never cheated a reader of any book I've ever written. I've never cheated. You're always found out if you cheat. I had to do those things that you had to go along with. It was all part of the pattern of selling the product, and the product was me.
Tomorrow night on BBC Knowledge, Maximilian Schell's profile of Marlene Dietrich at 9, followed by a film in which she stars, Rancho Notorious, at 10:30.